So just keep that in mind. We will be doing some Q&A. Please feel free to either raise your hand if you have anything that you want to ask Jeff, or go ahead and put it in the chat. With that, I will throw over to Jeff and you can take it away. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Paul, for having me, and welcome everyone. I thank you all for joining today. I'm actually standing, so you might see me moving around, and I'm going to be using some speaker notes, so if my eyes drop, I just want to make sure I'm getting all the points out to you and that I don't miss anything. And as my boss used to say at DDB, never let Jeff Swystun go off script, so I'm going to try to stick to that. Great of the ICA to step up their programming at this time. I continue to enjoy a great relationship with the association dating back to Interbrand and DDB days, so nice to be with everyone today. I feel a bit daunted actually by the content given the state of the world, but I want to communicate and hopefully have you remember that this is a time to return to fundamentals, and I'll certainly be hitting on that point. A time to reset what we do and how we do it, and to build more resiliency into our businesses and perhaps even our lives. So I have not picked a tiny topic by any stretch. And I hope you're all seeing the presentation. I'm going to divvy up this talk into 3 areas. We're going to chat about how the consumer will view the new world and what they will expect. Next up is the work we do as an industry to be ever more credible and relevant. And finally, how agencies will reset. And obviously, we are going to be resetting our business. And as Leah said, we're going to leave plenty of time for discussion. I'm going to be a bit bold and perhaps foolhardy with my predictions and recommendations. I'm not trying to be a futurist by any stretch. Where I landed in the material is mostly based on history, and I will soon share why I have some credibility in looking back to see a way forward. Prior to these current events, I've long advocated for a return to fundamentals in branding, marketing, and advertising. I thought we'd lost our way in so many ways. I speak at many business schools and was shocked to see they're no longer teaching segmentation. It worried me that agencies embraced digital to the point of losing humanity. And it was demeaning when brands subjugated agencies to being tactical order takers with procurement departments, equating our profession with copier machine providers. The slide now up is one I was using pre-COVID about the history of marketing, and is now even more relevant, as you'll see through this presentation. We've got to look past to get forward. And as much as I admire the big brands, I believe great marketing lessons can be found in the grassroots, in small business stories and from digging into our past. I love to hear about small brands and long ago lost tales of marketing. I will share some in this presentation, and I believe you'll agree that there are things going on right now in our industry that are going to make for amazing stories later. A big catalyst for my belief in the power of marketing fundamentals was a visit to a farmer's market about 8 years ago. I live in Mont-Tremblant, Quebec, and one summer I begrudgingly visited our local market at my wife's insistence. I would prefer a round of golf, but my pouting gave way to a fantastic experience. Entering the market, we were greeted by lively banter between the vendors and customers. On this transformed civic parking lot were rows of tented stalls and displays, a rich assortment of the staples people require and the luxuries we desire. Meats, breads, veggies, artisan items engaged all of my senses. I smelled bread, I saw amazing flowers, but most importantly, I witnessed the very essence of marketing broken down into its clear components. There was bartering, there was taste testing, there were promotions. Vendors greeted loyal customers and attempted to attract new ones. The packagings of the jams, salsas, and chocolates was inspiring. But what stood out was the simplicity of exchange, powered by the passion from the entrepreneurs and the reciprocated appreciation of the customers. Now, here's a fun fact. I remember an episode of Mad Men where Betty, Don Draper's wife, is having a dinner party and says, Carla, the housekeeper, did the marketing. And it struck me, what Carla, the housekeeper, did the marketing. What she was actually saying was Carla did the grocery shopping. 50 years ago, shopping was called marketing. So it's really interesting by digging in our past. Since that time, as an industry, we have so overcomplicated things. That is why I reinforce the fundamentals, and I believe these times call for it more than ever. And you will hear this more than a few times in the presentation. Marketing exists to help people make better decisions. Full stop. That's it. That reason for being is a great guide and a reminder not to overcomplicate what we do, and more on that a bit later. I've also been thinking about Maslow's hierarchy, as we all could expect. It's become more important these days. And this is a hierarchy I've long used working with brands. This one on screen displays the range of engagement from the attributes, the basic things the product provides or the service provides, to the higher order benefit of what it enables. Inherent in the graphic is the psychology of the consumer. It illustrates how a brand and agency can engage and compel them, but most importantly, how a brand and agency can help a consumer make that better decision. And making better decisions is now the name of the game. So let's start in on consumers. I promised 3 sections: consumers, the work we do, and our agencies. Do you remember David Ogilvy's famous quote, "The customer is not a moron, she's your wife"? Sir David was saying that communication should treat the customer as intelligent and capable of seeing through blatant hype. Our times have heightened the need for authenticity. Through this crisis, we have seen brands tread carefully in their messaging. And there's already been 2 or 3 cycles or themes, and I'm sure you've all identified them. First came that sort of public service announcement type messaging that conveyed all that we should be doing to help flatten the curve. Then came communications about brands were doing for their customers, in terms of pushing back payments, mortgage payments, car payments, upping customer service, basically being there for you. Now we are largely in the period of thanking all those doing their part, whatever it may be. And I pitched a thank you campaign to a client about 2 weeks ago. As always, timing is everything. They were reluctant to run with it, but I respected their decision making. But what it said to me was no one was really confident in the decisions that they were making, and still really aren't. But the good news when it comes to consumers, and this has always been true, is the communication, we're all consumers. All communication professionals are consumers. And so we don't have to put ourselves in the consumer shoes. We're already in them. So do work that you appreciate and resonates with you. And that hits on the respect that Ogilvy was getting at with the wife not being a moron. Let's get more specific because I have some good specifics. What do customers want now? How do we engage with them in these times? I think it's fair to say, certainly is for me, that we want to hear good news, that we want to share good news and spread it. So messaging that is honest, transparent, and uplifting should resonate. I'm sure many of you tuned into the One World concert on Saturday. Perhaps it was the vodkas I consumed or my own personal state at the time, but I was not uplifted by its format or content. For sure, there was a few great performances, but I was left with more of a little personal malaise and melancholy about it. Because to me, tonality is everything in communications right now. I actually sweated over the tonality of this presentation, and I hope what I project is practical, cautious optimism. Because tonality is now a risk for individual brands. We're seeing it already. Every ad, every brand is sharing the same tonality. If marketing was white noise prior to this because of the sheer volume of advertising, it runs the risk of being white noise because every brand is sounding the same. And the only way out is good news about the defeat of the virus. Without a doubt, we are all in this together, and there's a strange comfort to that. I feel it personally. Brands are communicating not to the masses, but to one mass. I have a strange side story that I hope I can impart with some clarity. My wife is actually a psychotherapist, so that's fantastic. I've got a built-in counselor during these times and a built-in counselor during the entire marriage. And we both thought she would get super busy with video and telephone counseling, but that hasn't been the case. Her clients who are experiencing highly personal anxiety and depression issues pre-COVID either have more immediate concerns, or we believe, now they feel much more kinship with everyone and have contextualized or compartmentalized their previous issues. Regardless, I find this all fascinating, and we're going to have to delve a lot into human behavior as communication professionals. But soon brands will have to return to more personalized messages, and hopefully will not be tone deaf when that happens. I wrote to a company last week suggesting the content, tone, and frequency of their email marketing should be re-examined. My email was acknowledged, which was good practice, but the actual bad marketing persists. And you know what? It's kind of leaving a bad taste in my mouth. So let's see where we're at here. Next one is everyone always being on. You know, I've not quite found my own insight or conclusion to what before COVID was what I'd call a digital addiction for many of us. and what now is a digital necessity for virtually all of us. I may have to cop out here without providing a super brainwave. I have seen many people opining that the past normal will not return. So going forward, I hope we'll have a greater appreciation for getting outside, sharing time with people in person. It would be amazing if we use technology as a tool rather than a pacifier. If so, that will affect how brands and agencies view and use digital channels to communicate. Marketing has always been about wants and needs, and we're drawing that line between the two much heavier these days. If I was to make any prediction, it would be consumers will be more interested in simple, reliable products. In the first week of the crisis, I loaded up on groceries, and that same day our fancy metallic fridge stopped working. And you know, those were hectic days that first week. You were really worried about everything, and all of a sudden our fridge was out. It's one of those that looks great, but it's over-engineered with electronics. Obviously, no repair people were available in that first week of the lockdown. Luckily, we have a simpler, smaller white fridge in the basement. It has one tactile dial, and it did not let us down. By the way, I shut off the breaker to the fancy fridge, which rebooted it several days later, but I continue to kiss the white fridge every time I pass it in the basement. It saved our bacon, literally. A second prediction is sustainability and less waste will be at the forefront of people's considerations. I have a new appreciation for food. I've certainly loved it a lot, but I have a new appreciation for it. And for many different types, I've either avoided or was not open to, and the whole damn supply chain and how it works, I've become an expert in that. In our home, we are stretching, combining, and using food in ways never before. I now put parsley on everything and discovered that tin escargot, which sounds very fancy, is only $3 a can. So there's a little shopping tip for you. Simple and sustainable will be a huge part of the way forward. We as consumers know that, and we as marketers will emphasize that. So let's shift to the work communication agencies do. I've had the privilege of working at two consulting firms, a brand consultancy and a global agency. And in the past 8 years, I've consulted over 20 agencies in consulting on their own branding and marketing. I'll be frank, I think we've clearly overcomplicated the work we do. I link this to a bizarre inferiority complex our industry has perpetuated. We feel insecure and have responded by justifying our existence and compensation with overwrought processes and more technology. It is fair to say no other industry has created more award shows for itself. I had a discussion last week with the CEO of a large digital agency, and he thought actually this will cull most of the award shows, this global event, that we'll have a strong gut check and this cottage industry will be let go even when good times return. Not sure about that. All I know is we exist to do great work, work that is intelligent, yet simple and rich, entertaining and informative, beautiful and impactful, but only a client's business results count, results tied to consumers making better decisions. One idea I can give you when it comes to doing good work going forward is to position everything as a solution. Last year, I published this book, and this was the primary tenet of the book. Customers will get more discriminating, and they will appreciate what a product or service can clearly do for them. Luxuries are going to be sacrificed for that reliable white fridge in the basement. Our lives are in for a forced and probably welcome simplification. Our work will be less about influencing a purchase and more about informing a purchase. The book actually hit on that distinction by showing how marketing has been highly sophisticated for centuries. It blew me away in doing the research, and that most impactful marketing is respectful of consumers, sets up a decision for them to make, and positions everything as a solution. To keep that tenet front and center for you folks, and the work you do, think of the mattress industry. This was something I learned at DDB. I loved it. You know, they don't sell coils and cloth and fabric. They do not market mattresses. They market the sleep. That's the solution. That's the solution positioning. And it will be core to every campaign we're going to be working on going forward. I could do a whole day seminar on how we need to stop overcomplicating the work we do. Instead, let me provide a fun illustration of what I believe, because we can all use a bit of fun these days. I think most of us can recall the Think Small ad from 1959. DDB did the work, and Ad Age recognized it as the best campaign of the last century. Shortly after it came out, this gentleman, Hal Rainey, who was working at BBDO at the time, he was much younger then, this is taken later in his career, he published an article in Creative Arts magazine that demonstrated what might have happened to this fantastic ad if commonly accepted rules had been applied and overcomplication took place. It is an old print ad, but believe me, the tenets, the lessons in it could be applied to social, digital, video, whatever. So here we're going to walk you through it. So to reprise your memory, there's this great ad. And remember, this was groundbreaking at the time. The use of the real estate in this magazine ad, the fact that the product was so small, but it had a grabby bit of copy at the bottom. And now let's apply what's called Raineys Rules now to it. These are the commonly accepted and still are accepted rules of putting together an advertisement. So rule number one, you got to make sure you show the product. So boom, make that VW Beetle big. And it stands out. Don't use negative headlines. So Rainey applied that to the ad. Think big instead of think small. So we see how this is, how the rules and the overthinking and the overcomplication are impacting the ad. Whenever possible, mention your product name in the headline. So there we go. We got Volkswagen spelled out now, and you can see how the ad is changing. Next rule, whenever possible, show people enjoying your product. Of course, you've got to have people in there. You want to visualize yourself in the ad. So what do? Yeah, we just make up something crazy like a VW Bug showing up at a, I don't know, Southern Cotillion or something like that. We've also changed the font a bit too to make it fancy. Always feature news in your advertisement. Okay, so let's put in some news. You can see some product features there. I don't know what a sizzler is, but it's certainly got some sass and skedaddle. And you can see all the logos changing a bit as well. Always give prominent display to your product logo. Yeah, that's a tenet to share. So now we can see Volkswagen is huge. We're getting a little bit busy here, I guess you could say. Avoid all unpleasant connotation about your product. Remember, this is 1959, 14 years after World War II, and Volkswagen was a German car company. So let's put that American flag in there and call it the all-American car. Always tell the reader where you can buy your product. Of course, let's make it easy for them to buy. So right down there, you got your friendly authorized dealer, crowding the ad up now, as you can see. Always localize your ads. Yes, let's make it local. So now here's where you can go to your favorite dealer. And this is how Rainey communicated that if we overcomplicate things, if we structure too many rules, put too many processes, too many people in the mix, you know, we end up with an ad done by committee, you could say. It's a fine illustration and metaphor how we overcomplicate communications. I believe it applies not only to core ideas and ad campaigns and content, but also to how we use channels. It's also a lesson for how we structure our agencies and deliver client work. But if we remember that we're in the business of informing a decision, our work will be relevant, different, and valuable. So let's talk about agencies. We've talked about the consumer, and I've given you a speculative conclusion that they will be in the simple, reliable, and sustainable headspace. We just covered the work we do and know that we are the bridge between brand and consumer to facilitate better decisions. Now we're going to chat about our agencies. What can we do in the business to survive and hopefully thrive? This was the work I was doing even pre-COVID, helping agencies on their business and brand strategies. And interestingly, as I was preparing for this and talking to Paul and Leah, I thought, well, I've got to come up with some new stuff. This is a whole new time. And interestingly, the tenets I'm going to share with you now, I've been sharing for a long time. They still apply. First off, I think it's going to be imperative, though, for every agency to change its narrative or rewrite its own narrative now. We have to document that, recognize that times have changed, and we have to reposition our businesses. We've been too reliant, I think, on PR tactics in the agency world, and lean on press releases to announce, new client wins or an award show win. Our industry has been really challenged, our agencies within it, to brand themselves. It's kind of rife in our industry with cobbler shoes scenario, which is defined as someone very good at their profession, but are completely unable or unwilling to use this ability on themselves. I think the majority of agencies can do a lot better. Here is a really funny and sad tale. Last year, I did a piece of work that involved evaluating 30 mid-size agencies on behalf of a brand. 22 of them, as I was just doing cursory research, 22 of them featured an office dog on their website in the staff listing. We've all seen them, that cutesy dog, the office dog. Not much differentiation there. If 22 agencies are doing it out of 30, I looked at more of a herd mentality. I often wonder which agency was first to feature a dog and why the bandwagon really got going. But what I'm getting at is every agency needs to be a best practice case in their own marketing, and that's going to be huge going forward. Clients are going to look past the NASCAR slide of other client logos. They will discount featured case studies unless they include impressive quantifiable results. I jokingly have a number, 97% of agency case studies are wishy-washy stuff. They're really, there's nothing in them. And clients are going to drill down on your process and methodology. And I'm not being flippant when I say you probably have some time now to make your brand better, so why not get at it? You know, let's be frank, work is drying up or being delayed. That is a fact, a sad one. You have to keep the lights on, this too I know. And there will be the obvious reaction by many agencies to say yes to almost any piece of work that comes their way. And I can understand that decision. Yet agencies that still focus on a specialism or specific niche should perform better in the longer term. Being a generalist may be a short-term survival strategy, but it's not going to be a long-term thriving strategy. As you address your brand, address your services, and look for this opportunity that any crisis or downturn presents. And tomorrow I've actually been invited to attend a board meeting of an agency, and I'll be facilitating a session on that very topic. Is there a way we can find something in this for them to do and do differently? So if you agree that we are all the bridge between brand and consumer, then we are in a pretty enviable position, still in a very enviable position. For years, I've been advocating that agencies possess capabilities, experience, and tools that do not have to be applied to solely communications. Clients love good business ideas, not just campaigns. While with DDB, I became aware of a program that BBDO is doing. I think the acronym was big. I can't remember what it stood for. Basically, it tasked account teams to come up with one business idea per quarter for their clients to strengthen the relationship and get out of the box that we find ourselves pushed into. So not an advertising idea, not a tagline, not a video, a business idea. All of you on this call are probably very talented, smart folks surrounded by other very talented, smart folks. COVID is an opportunity to dazzle clients with strategy and not just creative, if you get my meaning. You should be thinking about your client's business, picking up the phone with good ideas. If you are like me, you're getting tons of emails from your professional network with very nice sentiments about health and safety. That's great. I've sent those too. Now we have to shift and put some real new world ideas together. Every communication from your agency to prospect and clients should have an idea, a solution in it. I've worked with company Bond Brand Loyalty for years. You know, a experience in loyalty agency. Bob McDonald's the CEO there in front. Fantastic people, obviously. It'd be great to gather like that again soon. And the Chief Strategy Officer, Sean Clausen, when this really hit about a month ago, put a piece out in Forbes on how businesses can retool to help fight the disease. He was really quick to it, and it was a very thoughtful piece. It was strategic, insightful. Sean's piece was not about the experience business, the loyalty business. It addressed strategy for many business. I loved his idea of taking shuttered fast food restaurants and converting them into drive-through testing sites or kit distribution locations. Clients are looking for this and will reward agencies who think both about their communications and their business. So broaden your thinking now in this crisis outside of the communication bucket. Here is kind of our summary of everything that we've discussed. The consumer, I think this is going to be their mindset: simple, reliable, sustainable. In terms of the work we do, avoid that complication, position everything as a solution, and remember, you're now here to inform, not influence. And when you think about your own business, construct a new narrative. Find a specialism, stick to your knitting, be really sharp about it, but broaden that thinking to business strategies. To summarize, marketing exists to help consumers make better decisions. I've always believed that, and it'll never be more relevant than it is now. And we are sitting in that enviable situation of working between brands and consumers. We got a lot to offer, not just in communications, but in smart thinking. Lastly, we all need a little inspiration. So I love this quote. I just happened across it. digest that, start getting your questions ready. I've got a Canadian club sitting next to me. I'm going to have a sip of it as the first question comes up. My cocktail hour started earlier now. Thank you all for your attention.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff. So if anybody wants to, you can do it a couple different ways. You can raise your hand and unmute and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat. Scott, is that you giving us a hands up emoji or a high five emoji?
That was a round of applause emoji.
Okay.
Oh,
Jeff, thank you, Jeff.
thank you. I thought it was a slap Jeff emoji. So that was
No.
Could be that too. Jeff, I have to say, one of the things that really resonates with me, and one thing that I talk a lot about with agencies when I go on site, is that idea of articulating their value and being able to niche. I like this idea of being a big fish in a small pond, but agencies are very reticent to do that. Can you give them some advice or some way to talk about this with their board and their managers on moving forward on really understanding how to specialize for them, because they hate to say no to anything?
Yeah, no, it's been common. And I think it's because we've got a constrained way of thinking that when we say we're niche or we've got a specialism, that we're talking about, we only do videos for grocery stores in Canada around milk. They think that's got to get so specific. It's not that. Always the way an agency is structured is not its departments, not its org chart. It's about one core thing they do very, very well. Once again, I'm not saying it's video production or it's TV ads or that. When you think of a specialism or you think of being focused, it's more of a mindset change, right? And it's not picking something so specific that, of course, you're going to crumble the next day. It's something that is inherent. It is your unique proposition, Leah, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think there's some, we talk to our agencies about actually workshopping it, and it might be as simple as starting the conversation with your folks. Whoops, sorry, put myself on mute. It might be as simple as working through what you're good at, what is profitable for you, what things run through your process in an easy way. And I think you hit on a really good point, and something we talk about under our new business, our qualification-based selection, which is understand your process. That's part of who you are, and that's intrinsic in your DNA. And that is essentially what a client is buying. How you arrive at the solutions for our business challenge is as important as arriving at the solution, how the client kind of works within that and how you work.
Yeah, and we've overcomplicated things, as I've said, also in agency structure, and there's that great old quote, the way the mill operates becomes more important than the flour it produces. And I think that's what we've got hung up on. So as I hope what resonated as part of the presentation is going back to what you do extremely well and focusing on that. That is your niche. It's not, I'm only going to focus on automotive. It's not like that. It's not about getting a sector specific or anything like that. It's what you do extremely well and blowing that out in your own narrative.
So we have a question from Kate Marshall. Sorry, I glanced at your question, Kate, and I thought you were telling me that I was muted. So I had a little bit of a freak out, but she is asking, do you think agencies will/should also look to merging?
Oh, I think that's going to happen. Yeah, definitely. Especially in the big holding company models, there's going to be that going on. It was said even before this was going to happen almost regardless, that there was going to be a lot of change within our industry in terms of mergers, combinations. You see historic old agencies collapsing in the holding company model and being merged with others. So this is just going to heighten and speed it up.
Yeah, I think there'll be some interesting things to come on that landscape for sure. Any other questions? Just going to give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, I would love more. If anyone, anything. I can get very granular too if you want. I kept it high level. If you want to talk about how agencies are restructuring, anything like that. And once again, I'd also like to volunteer. I'm not always on the clock. So even if any of the people on the call just want to give me a chat time, I'd love to give you 30 minutes and chat through anything you guys are experiencing. And hopefully I can add some value. Also, we'll make this presentation and my speaker notes available. And you'll see I spoke to it pretty succinctly. I didn't go off script, but happy to share anything. And on my website, there's a ton of resources too at Swystun Communications, all around agency business.
I think it's interesting about the technology for sure. There's been a lot of stuff out there, and my friend Chris, who I think is on the phone, was talking about Amara's Law, where he says that technology in the short term is overrated and technology in the long term is underrated. And I'm wondering if you add into that analogy or that theory, you add a pandemic where people are now forced. And I think, you know, we've even seen from a generational perspective, people have been forced to grab hold of technology in ways that maybe they would not have previously done it. When we look at folks that are in the traditionalist category that maybe were at arm's length with technology, they just didn't have that ability. They had to learn how to use it and utilize it. So I think that'll be an interesting shift for us.
Yeah, no, I want to, you know, give you the image of me tossing off my iPad and running through the woods, because that's where I want to get to, and feel sane.
So we have another question.
Excellent.
How will tonality of advertising and messaging change in the coming weeks? Will it settle down as we're all home for longer and the situation becomes routine?
Yeah, I think we're already in that, to tell you the truth. And I'm not sure, you know, really what we need is good news on combating the virus before brands are going to change the tone. So I think this tone is consistent. It has been for a couple of weeks, and I couldn't forecast when it will change. And if you were a CMO of a big corporation that is maybe essential or still doing work or, you know, whatever, you know, the last thing you're going to do is be the first to switch out of that, out of that tone to a, you know, a more playful or pre-COVID tone, unless, you know, we've had weeks of returning to normalcy. So I think we're going to be in this for a long time. We're going to continue to have this very safe, guarded tone from brands, and I really can't blame them. I want at least one more question.
I'd like to.
Sorry, go ahead, Leah.
I would just like to know, sorry, Paul, you can ask your question, but if people can start thinking about, I'd love to know what challenges you guys have been facing this week. From my perspective, every week has had its own challenges, and solutions to business challenges that you would have provided to your client in week one have now changed. They may have been thrown out the window. If they didn't act on them then in week one, it's kind of too late. They can't pick up the baton and run with it now. So I'd love to know, like, if people could just maybe shout out what their challenges are this week that they're dealing with. Sorry, Paul, go ahead. While people are thinking about that, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was. Thanks for that, Jeff. Absolutely loved. I made so many notes of the really salient points, but I guess the one I was going to ask you was, as we go through a recession again, clients have probably got their kind of head in the weeds a lot with their business and real tactical things, as well as some strategy, I'm sure, absolutely sure. But I just wonder, do you think it's the opportunity for agencies now to kind of give that perspective, a bird's eye view of a brand that if you're in the brand, perhaps you can't quite see?
I think that's a great point. I'd love to mention the brand, but I can't. But it's, you know, multi-billion-dollar brand, and I was talking to the CMO about 2 weeks ago. It was actually when I was pitching this sort of thank you campaign to them. And he was shocked himself at how the C-suite, what he was a member was almost contracting into themselves and going into a turtling themselves. And I think a lot of brands are doing that right now because there's just so much uncertainty, so hard to predict things. You know, their first and foremost concerns are their employees going to remain their employees? Are they going to continue to be paid? So, you know, it's fair to say that traditional brand and advertising communications is really on the back burner, and for obvious reasons. But that, in working with our clients to impart to your audience, that once again doesn't mean you can't have an impact on the business. So, you know, maybe the communication budgets are drying up or being pushed back, and that's why I said come to them with just good ideas, regardless of where those ideas, how those ideas may impact the business. And that's the way to stay relevant. That's the way to stay in contact. I don't think going forward, clients are going to remember the work that was done before or the awards that the work won for them. They're going to remember the relationship. So anything you can do in this time to strengthen the relationship, as I say, drop an email with an idea, give a phone call, do something. We're in the business of differentiation. Think about how you can differentiate yourself now across you know, your existing prospective and past clients, and that will help.
Someone put, it was Stefan who put his challenge, and I think that this must, everyone I think can relate to this, but it's getting, so you've got a good idea, you know what your client should do, you know what the best way forward is for them. How do you get them to act? So I think there's so much inaction out there. How do we get our clients to act?
Well, you know, that it's so true. As I say, like this sounds terrible. My idea for that big brand was brilliant and was proven 2 weeks later. The timing was wrong. They weren't going to move. They weren't going to commit funds. Obviously, all of that stuff was going on, and I know we're all experiencing that. So all I can say to that, Leah, is it's tough. It's because it's tough for the decision makers to make a decision right now. But a good idea is always a good idea, right? And to me, it's always timing. So if I had pitched that maybe 4 days later, ironically, maybe they would have been in the frame of mind. So I know it's frustrating right now, but you can't give up. And the other thing too, I just want to also put a little tempo on this. Don't be plaguing your contacts too much, right? Don't go to them with a little idea every day. Really be thoughtful about it so that you stand out. But this stuff will, if you do it right, you will be rewarded, you know, as we begin to pick up again. They're going to remember the relationship. They're going to remember that you gave effort. And that's going to be important. I think I would make another radical prediction is when the question about merging was going on, I think a lot of established relationships with brands and agencies are going to change. So there's going to be a lot of churn in who's got what client. So that's going to be opportunity for us going forward as well, because I think the relationships are just going to be super reevaluated now.
Yeah, I don't think there's one simple answer for Stefan's question.
No, not at all.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I think to your point, you know, one of in our unique kind of sales flow, we have to just be ready. We have to have laid that foundation when they're ready. We want us to be their first call. So if we can just make our points, we're not going to sell everything into the client. They're not going to always do everything that we want them to. But setting that foundation and making sure that when they are ready, that we come top to mind because they know that we put ideas in front of them, that we're there with their best interest truly at heart.
That's well said. Very well said.
Any other questions? I think Kate might take you up on your offer of some one-on-one coaching time. I think that was such a generous offer Jeff. And so if anybody wants to take Jeff up on that, please connect with me and I will connect you. I put my email and Paul's email in the chat, and we'd be happy to do that. I think that's one thing that really is shining through in the ICA community that we set up what seems like a year ago, but it was only a few weeks ago. And honestly, no one that we've reached out to that's a thought leader in our industry has said no. I think everybody wants to share their best practices. We've had agencies sharing with each other. If something works, they want everyone to know. If something doesn't work, they want everyone to know. And so much generosity, so much authenticity, and so much vulnerability in this industry. So everybody wants the tide to be high and raise all boats. So thank you very much, Jeff, for your presentation. And thank you so much for your offer.
Loved it. I loved this time with you all. It felt normal. It's good. I love to present and share. That's great. And as I'll just reiterate, please do reach out if you want any materials from me. Happy to help.
Absolutely. And we've got the recording, and so we will make that available at some point as well. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
We'll give back a little bit of the gift of time. You've got 14 minutes to, I don't know, cuddle with your dog or your kids. So stay safe, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Leah.